My whole life, I attended the Church of Christ. First, at Long Island Church of Christ for about 15 years, then the Patchogue Church of Christ where I attend now. I grew up within a very musical environment. Everyone in my family sings or plays an instrument. I myself learned from my older brother and dad, who taught me everything I know. My dad would lead the choir at my church when I was younger. The choir was solely a cappella. Growing up having this, I believe that music is one of the biggest and most influential parts of church service. The music has a chance of being transcendent to the listener. So I visited 6 different churches throughout the semester: St. Peter's, Corpus Christi, St. Francis of Assisi, Marble Collegiate, St. John's, and the 6th being my home church, to see how this played out. When visiting these churches, I found there was a lot of differences, but I believe one of my favorite aspects was the music, specifically 3 churches that I'm going to talk about in no specific order: St. Francis of Assisi, Marble Collegiate, and St. John's. When I visited St. John's on Kingsbridge, it was the first out of all my field studies that had a soloist. Before this, all other churches were choirs accompanied by one single instrument, but this was much different, consisting of a soloist with other instruments. I enjoyed this experience. The singer was operatic, and it was something I had never heard before. I enjoyed listening to her sing. Even though she was over-amplified, I found myself just closing my eyes and listening to her sing the hymns. The feeling of the music took away from the fact that the hymns did not correlate with the sermon. I was so taken by the music that I did not notice this until considering the readings and songs separately, and somebody mentioned it in class. Another example was St. Francis Assisi, which, though different from St. John's, caught my attention in the same way. The singer at this church was also female like St. John's, but her voice was different. As opposed to being operatic, her voice had an R&B-esque to it, undeniably. It was all in English, so I really felt I could connect to it better, because I could understand the words. The song she was singing reminded me of something I could hear Celine Dion singing. Specifically, it reminded me of a song from Prince of Egypt by Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, When You Believe. I used to watch this movie a lot when I was younger, and hearing the singer at St. Francis really brought me back to those times. At St. Francis, the singer was really able to touch my childhood. Lastly, but definitely not least, I visited Marble Collegiate. I believe this was my favorite field study of all, and defines the most of what I mean that music has a chance of being transcendent to the listener. When I walked in, they were very polite in sitting me down even though I was late. Even though I would like to elaborate on that, my favorite thing about this church was its music. We weren't in the actual church, but instead at a lounge next door for worship. There were 3 singers on stage, 2 girls and 1 guy, a pianist who was also singing, a drummer, and a bassist. It almost sounds like a lot, but it sounded amazing. I was so taken by their vocals that I wanted to stay longer. The highlight of that evening, however, was after the service was done, the pianist said when she heard the preacher was preaching about getting through the fire, she knew Through the Fire would be a perfect song for the message, even though it was secular. So at the end of the service, they sang Through the Fire by Shaka Khan. It was so moving that I could not help but smile as they were singing the whole time. I felt empowered after the rendition of the song, and I believe that it correlated with the sermon given. Concluding this, I believe that music of the church is so important and influential and shouldn't just be based on what is tradition. Sometimes starting new can bring others in, or reaching out to other age groups. The music that was more modern moved me. It may be different to others, but I was moved by these 3 field studies more than any other. Their music was transcending, and I believe that it is one of the most influential parts of church.